A disaster that defied all logic. In the year 1951, the weather at first appeared calm and cooperative, giving sailors no reason for alarm. The National Weather Service, NWS, had been monitoring a massive November storm, but their early forecast predicted it would drift harmlessly to the south of Lake Superior. However, late on the night of November 9th, that assumption collapsed. Barometric pressure plunged rapidly, signaling a violent change. It became undeniable. The storm was not veering south. It was coming straight for Lake Superior with full force. At approximately 4:30 p.m. that same day, a bulk carrier named Arthur M. Anderson departed from Two Harbors, Minnesota. Just behind her, following the same general course, was the much larger Edmund Fitzgerald. The Anderson, though respectable in size, was an older and slightly slower vessel. She had originally been built shorter, but modifications over time had extended her hull to improve capacity, though not her speed. Before long, the Titanic of the Great Lakes, the Edmund Fitzgerald, overtook her and pushed ahead, leading the way toward the Sioux Locks. The Fitzgerald was heading for Detroit, while the Anderson was en route to Gary, Indiana. The Anderson was under the command of Captain Jesse Bernie Cooper, a seasoned mariner as experienced and respected as Captain Ernest McSorley of the Edmund Fitzgerald. Cooper knew his vessel intimately, and he knew the Fitzgerald well too. He respected both ships, but even more, he respected November storms on the Great Lakes. Storms feared by every sailor who had ever battled their deadly winds and crushing waves. These storms were not ordinary weather. They were infamous, unpredictable, and lethal. As night slowly deepened, the two ships kept in communication. Both had National Weather Service observation equipment on board, allowing them to provide real-time updates across the lake. Through constant radio contact, both captains agreed. The storm was growing worse by the minute. They adjusted their course together, staying close to the Canadian shoreline to use the landmass as a buffer against the storm's violent push. But Captain Cooper could see trouble coming. He warned that the approaching storm would overtake them before they reached the safe waters of Whitefish Bay, Michigan. November storms on Lake Superior do not simply pass by. They smash, they destroy, and they kill. As winds screamed and towering waves rose, both captains understood what they were up against. From the Anderson's pilot house, one could look back and see the freighter flexing with the waves, its long steel deck rising and falling, the stern lifting and dropping in a rhythmic battle with the brutal water. Strangely enough, this was reassuring. Unlike the rigid ships of earlier decades, these vessels were designed to bend, to survive by flexing instead of breaking. Every sailor on the Great Lakes remembered what happened to ships that did not bend. According to the Anderson's log, their vessel remained approximately 15 miles behind the Edmund Fitzgerald, still tracking her movements by radar as the distance gradually narrowed. The waters grew increasingly violent, with massive waves crashing across the main decks of both ships. Around 6 p.m., Captain Cooper briefly left the bridge to rest, leaving command to his first officer, who noted that the waves had now risen to nearly 25 feet in height. By 7 p.m., the Edmund Fitzgerald was less than an hour from the entrance to Whitefish Bay. Anderson's first mate contacted Captain McSorley to report that the Fitzgerald was now 10 miles ahead and roughly 15 miles from the relative safety near Crisp Point. 10 minutes later, at 7:10 p.m., the Anderson picked up another unidentified radar target farther south. They radioed the Fitzgerald to report, "There is a vessel 19 miles ahead of us," which means it should be about 9 miles ahead of you. McSorley asked whether his course was clear, and the reply from Anderson confirmed that the distant ship would pass safely to the west. McSorley ended calmly, acknowledging the transmission with a short response before Anderson's first mate casually asked how they were managing their earlier damage. McSorley replied that they were maintaining control. This transmission became the final recorded communication from the crew of the Edmund Fitzgerald. The Anderson's mate signed off, unaware that those would be the last words ever heard from the ship. Once the conversation ended, Captain Cooper returned to the bridge and continued monitoring the Fitzgerald's radar trace, still visible 9 miles ahead. Soon after, the snowfall ceased abruptly, and the horizon briefly cleared. Anderson's crew searched the dark lake ahead, expecting to see Fitzgerald's navigation lights, but there was nothing. Only 3 freighters traveling in the opposite direction crossed their view: the Norseman, the Benfrey, and the Avafor. Immediately concerned, Captain Cooper assumed that the Fitzgerald had suffered a full power failure, plunging her into darkness, and he ordered the crew to scan for any trace of her outline. By 7:20 p.m., a mere 10 minutes after the last radio call, the Andersons' radar detected only 3 returns, those of the other freighters, and the Fitzgerald's echo had vanished entirely. Cooper began calling repeatedly on the radio but received no reply. To confirm his own radio was working, he hailed various ships in the vicinity. Each responded clearly. He then attempted to contact the Coast Guard station at Sault Ste. Marie to report the disappearance, but no one answered. He tried again, contacting the other ships passing nearby, and all confirmed the same thing. No one had visual contact with the Edmund Fitzgerald, and no one could detect her on radar. At 8:32 p.m., Cooper finally reached the Coast Guard station at Sault Ste. Marie and relayed an urgent message. He expressed deep concern for the Edmund Fitzgerald, explaining that she had been just ahead of them, suffering from flooding issues, and now had completely vanished. No vessel had passed her. Her lights were no longer visible, and her position no longer appeared on radar. He feared that she might have plunged beneath the waves. The Coast Guard immediately began broadcasting distress hails. By 9 p.m., the Anderson officially reported the Edmund Fitzgerald missing. A massive search operation was initiated. Despite the severe storm, the Coast Guard asked the Anderson to reverse course and join the search effort, and they agreed without hesitation. Aircraft and rescue ships were scrambled, helicopters from Traverse City, the cutter Naugatuck from Sault Ste. Marie, another Coast Guard vessel from Duluth, Minnesota, along with Canadian fixed-wing aircraft and multiple commercial ships. They combed the storm-lashed waters relentlessly. None of the 29 crew members of the Edmund Fitzgerald were found, neither alive nor deceased. At 8 a.m. the next morning, the Anderson found the first debris, shattered fragments of lifeboats. Soon more wreckage appeared, torn life jackets, parts of a raft, broken oars, compressed air tanks, and lengths of rescue line. But no human remains, no personal belongings. The lifeboats recovered showed clear signs of extreme force. They had been torn violently from their davits while still secured, meaning they were never deployed during an evacuation attempt. Small trails of oil were later found, minor leakage from the bow thruster, and a small amount of heavy fuel from the main engine. But due to the near-freezing depths of the lake, the oil had thickened and solidified, preventing most leakage. The wreck itself was not located until November 14th, when side-scan sonar detected 2 massive shapes resting deep on the lake bed. Multiple survey runs were made, but positive identification was not confirmed until May of the following year, when the U.S. Navy deployed Curve 3, a remote-controlled underwater camera. The images finally confirmed the truth. The Edmund Fitzgerald lay broken on the floor of Lake Superior, at a depth of approximately 530 feet. Her hull had split into 2 large sections, separated by nearly 200 feet of scattered wreckage. The bow section sat upright, heavily crumpled at the point of impact, while the stern lay overturned on the lake bottom, surrounded by a vast debris field. No remains were initially reported near the wreck. What followed was one of the most extensive maritime investigations in Great Lakes history. The United States Coast Guard and the National Transportation Safety Board launched a massive inquiry. They gathered testimony from the crew of the Arthur M. Anderson, dock workers from Burlington Northern Railroad, former sailors familiar with the ship, retired lake captains, ship survey records, weather data, and naval engineering reports. Every available piece of evidence was collected. Months later, the Coast Guard released its official report. According to their findings, the clamps securing the cargo hatch covers either failed or were not properly fastened, allowing huge amounts of water to enter the cargo hold during the storm. The flooding increased gradually until the Fitzgerald lost buoyancy, drove bow first beneath the surface, and disappeared into the depths of Lake Superior. But many experts rejected this conclusion. Paul E. Trimble, president of the Lake Carriers Association and a former vice admiral of the U.S. Coast Guard, strongly criticized the report, calling its conclusion incorrect. Other investigators proposed alternative explanations, that the Fitzgerald was struck by a series of enormous rogue waves, that she ran over the dangerous 6-fathom shoal and tore open her hull, or that metal fatigue caused a catastrophic structural failure, similar to the disasters that destroyed the Carl D. Bradley and the Daniel J. Morrell decades earlier. Determined to uncover the truth, independent researchers, divers, engineers, and historians launched their own investigations. Expeditions returned to the wreck again and again, studying everything: the deck hatch integrity, hull damage, stress failure points, and underwater debris patterns. During one of these expeditions in 1994, human remains were discovered for the first time, a single crew member, still clad in protective gear and wearing a cork flotation life jacket, lying near the bow, face toward the surface of the water. No identification could be made. The circumstances surrounding the body remained unknown. The final moments of the Edmund Fitzgerald remained locked in darkness, silent and unanswered. No emergency signal had been sent in her last moments, and the lake gave no explanation.